違うんですか？なんか皆様おはようございます。
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's time that we start the second plenary titled Pursuing a Sustainable Society, Sustainable Development Goals, Sustainable Lifestyles, and Well-Being. This session will be moderated by the President of IGES, Mr. Hideyuki Mori. Mr. Mori, please, the floor is yours.
Welcome to the first session of Day 2 of ISAP. My name is Hideyuki Mori, the President of IGES. And the first session on Day 2 is titled Pursuing a Sustainable Society, Sustainable Development Goals, which is called SDGs, and Sustainable Lifestyles and Well-Being. This is a very broad issue. But a lot of attention is now being paid to this issue because after Rio Plus 20, the global community has agreed to develop what they call sustainable development goals, goals which will promote sustainable development in a broader sense. And therefore now many stakeholders have been discussing this issue intensively. And the final set of goals will be agreed September next year. So various stakeholders in Asia also started to discuss these important goals very intensively. And in this respect, we are very happy to have three speakers this morning. And in this session, we are going to have three keynote speeches first, and then open the floor for question and answer session. And we have three speakers here. Let me introduce each one of them. The first speaker will be Dr. Shamshad Akhtar, the Executive Secretary of the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific. The second speaker is Dr. Kaveh Zahedi, the Regional Director and the Representative, United Nations Environment Program, Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific. The third speaker is Mr. Toru Fukushima, the President of Fukushima Unite in Japan. So we are very happy to have these three distinguished speakers for this morning session. So let us immediately start this session. So may I now invite Dr. Akhtar to speak on this topic from ESCAP's point of view. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. First of all, let me compliment the Institute of Global Environment Strategies. I think it's playing a valuable and an instrumental role in promoting sustainable development. And it's really an honor to be passing by in the region. I was invited by government of Japan. This is my first visit to Tokyo since I took over in February. And when I learned about this event, thanks to Your Excellency, as well as our colleagues at the Institute, to have the opportunity to be able to learn more with all of you about this event and the various dimensions of sustainable development. At the Economic and Social Commission for Asia and Pacific, we have tremendously valued our interaction with IGES and look forward to further fostering it further. Your institute and the 6th International Forum for Sustainable Asia and Pacific for this year are very relevant forums for advancing the global and regional debates on sustainable development. So in that context, we hope that this partnership will bloom further. Let me try to take you through what's going on in New York and also at the Asia Pacific Regional Commission. I believe we do stand at a very critical juncture in the evolution of sustainable development. Now, people have talked about sustainable development for a number of years, but I call it the evolution because this is the first time in the history of United Nations and global history that the forward-looking agenda will zero in on sustainable development, which is very different from the Millennium Development Goals, which were more focused on social and some elements of economics. So this is a pretty revolutionary step forward, as I see. The reason why I'm emphasizing this is that we are no longer talking about, in the development context, of looking at social development, economic development, and environmental development separately. But we are talking about and promoting integrated development of these three dimensions. And this is what Rio Plus 20 talked about. Just last week, after very intensive consultations and deliberations for over 1.5 years or so, the Open Working Group, which is constitutes of the members of the General Assembly, member states, have produced their final paper on sustainable development goals. This final paper talks about 17 goals, and it talks about over 150 or so targets. I'm not going to spell out these because this is available on the website, but suffice to say that the first few really try to carry forward and reinforce the Millennium Development Goals, largely because of the intense poverty, unattended agenda in the world. In parallel, we have another exercise going on in United Nations, which is also an intergovernmental process, which is called the Intergovernmental Committee on Experts on Sustainable Development Financing, and it is also due to shortly submit their findings and recommendation. So that's the activity at global level. There are about 5 plus regional commissions of United Nations. We have been mandated to try to coordinate and bring forward the priorities, issues and priorities of our specific regions. Now, I have the distinct honor of representing Asia and the Pacific, which is 55 plus countries, so it's not a small geography, and there is a tremendous amount of diversity within Asia-Pacific region itself. So we convened, with the support of Government of Thailand, the first ever inaugural Asia-Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development in last week, in the 3rd week of May in Pattaya. This is actually going to be a more regular process because while producing the Sustainable Development Goals and defining the development agenda, United Nations has also thoroughly revised its legal processes, and under that now regional commissions have been entrusted the responsibility to really conduct the regional process of high-level political forum. So we coordinate with, of course, our colleagues that represent various UN agencies, in particular also with UNEP, to work on the Sustainable Development Agenda. Let me at least briefly share with you some of the essential spirit of the Sustainable Development Agenda as it is emerging. I think The first step, which is being welcomed in United Nations, is that it is the first time that UN member states, which number close to 199 or whatever, have actually agreed on a paper. It may be too many goals, too many targets, but there is now a broad consensus on some essential elements. First is that there is a complete consensus that it should focus on eradicating poverty. Second, narrowing inequality, changing unsustainable patterns of growth and underlying this consumption and production, which my colleague will also amplify further, as well as protecting and managing our natural resource base for economic and social development. So this is the essence of the agenda in very short words. The Asia-Pacific region, when we met in May, places added emphasis on pursuing sustained and inclusive economic growth. Asia-Pacific has been the engine and the driver of global growth during the global recession, so it wants to continue placing emphasis on that. But what would be different is that it will have to do so with tremendous care of not to do it in a sustainable manner. The second element which came out very graphically in our deliberation was to promote gender equality and women's empowerment. And I know this is very important to the leadership of Japan. Third was building resilience to multiple shocks. Asia-Pacific has been home to several disasters and economic shocks, both regional as well as global, and this is very important for the region to develop its resilience. Fourth is responding to population dynamics and urbanization. As we know, we are home to the largest proportion of population of the world, and we have this contrasting situation where on one hand some countries face the burden of aging population, and on the other hand we have this young dynamic bulge of younger generation. So we have a responsibility to teach all of these diverse groups sustainable development and make sure that sustainable development helps them live a decent life. Then another area of emphasis is enhancing resource efficiency and natural resource management. And finally, deepening regional integration and connectivity. So this is the voice of Asia and the Pacific region. Now, in our discussion, as well as discussion at global and at regional level, it is okay to say what we are going to do, but how we are going to do is the more difficult question. So there has been a lot of debate on means of implementation, such as the financing for development, science and technology, trade, capacity building partnership, and governance for transformation towards sustainable development. Now, I have tried to give you a very quick snapshot of the most important elements of the debates of sustainable development. In interest of time, I'm not going to go deeper into it, but I will be very happy to talk about any of these if the time permits. I'd like to move to my second thing that I wanted to share with you, which is regarding my commission. 3 years ago, SCAP collaborated with IGES to take advantage of ISAP, this event like this of 2011, to ensure that multi-stakeholder voices from Asia Pacific fed into the regional preparations for Rio +20 and the following year. And I hope we can continue this collaboration in a more deeper way, because the more complex part, which is the implementation of the SDG, has yet to unfold after the negotiation. And I'm personally, I thought I'll come personally to give this message, but to make sure we think through going forward on the implementation path. Prior to that, we also at the SCAP worked on what we call the 5th Ministerial Conference on Environment and Development in Asia and the Pacific, which was organized by SCAP in Seoul, Republic of Korea, in March 2005. And we are going to have another ministerial conference soon. And basically, in the previous one, we adopted green growth as a pioneering regional strategy to achieve environmental sustainability while sustained rapid economic growth to eradicate persistent poverty. And we are working with a number of countries in trying to help them develop their strategy for green growth, the modeling for green growth, but also emphasizing inclusiveness in this green growth. To integrate and synergize the economic and environmental dimensions of sustainable development, of course, the role of climate change adaptation and mitigation has been increasingly recognized, and it is being encapsulated by SCAP in our what we call the low carbon green growth roadmap for Asia and the Pacific. I asked my colleagues, what is the difference between low carbon green growth versus the low carbon art network and all that? Just to explain to you very simply, it's one and the same thing, and they with different names depending on what part of the geography you are in, which country is promoting what concept and terminology. There could be some nuances, but let's simplify and say it's one and the same thing. So inspired by all this, a number of national development plans and policies have been prepared for improving resource efficiency and pursuing low carbon development. I will quote to you example of some important countries which are fairly advanced. One is, of course, China, where I was some weeks back. China has embraced the idea of green growth with the aim to shift its measure of economic success away from GDP-focused criteria towards a broader set of sustainability metrics. By transforming its development model to one that is more innovation-driven, it aims to achieve not only reduce climate change, but also to improving China's competitiveness and domestic energy security in the long run, allowing it to potentially attain a leadership position in advanced energy technologies. And China's 12th five-year plan provides specific goals and strategies to save energy and reduce reliance on fossil fuels, supporting its internationally communicated national emissions target of 40 to 45% reduction in emissions between 2005 and 2020. Similarly, Republic of Korea has announced in 2008 low carbon growth strategy as the country's guiding strategy, and this is substantiated by their target of reducing emissions by 30% by 2020. Indonesia has done something similar, and their government introduced a climate change sectoral roadmap, which has been integrated in their midterm development plan, and they plan to reduce greenhouse gas emission by 26% with international support by 2020. In the Pacific, SCAP2014 report, if you see, talks about Pacific perspectives, green economy in a blue world, and it underscored also very similar things, and some countries have very defined roadmaps. So this illustrates that we have penetrated at the national level, but there are several other examples which I'm not going to touch upon. But to conclude, let me talk about just something which is very important, is that we need to underscore in addition to all this, that besides adoption of sustainable production pattern, that we need to promote globally to pursue sustainable consumption and lifestyles. Only then we will be able to succeed in reducing the carbon footprint. And for basically, I have to compliment Japan, because Japan has many lessons and good practices to share with countries, because Japan's ecological footprint is much lower than the United States and few other countries. Of course, this is supported by a lot of investments, and we do hope that this partnership with Japan will be quite critical. promoting long-term strategies and strong policies, SCAP will continue to nurture its interface with the Low-Carbon Asia Research Network to share the experiences of developed and developing countries and foster long-term development plans and strategies to make a difference both on the consumption, lifestyle changes, as well as production. I'll stop here. I had more to talk about, but I was told that my time is up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We are going to have 3 presentations first, then after that, perhaps we go into question and answer session. So thank you very much, Dr. Akhtar, for a very comprehensive presentation on your initiative on SDGs and others. Next speaker is Dr. Kabe Zahedi from UNEP. So Kabe, please, your presentation.
Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Let me, of course, begin by thanking IGES for hosting this 6th session of the ISAP and for being gracious enough to invite us as the UN Environment Programme to participate and share some thoughts with you. Maybe I could just pick up from where Executive Secretary left off and complete a rather complex picture of what is going on in terms of discussions at the global level, which eventually will have, I believe, quite big impacts on a lot of what we do, all of our work at the national and, of course, regional level. If I could, I'm going to begin with the first ever United Nations Environment Assembly, which was held in Nairobi just a few weeks ago. And this is one of the results of Rio, where for the first time ever, a universal membership body, including all 193 members of the United Nations, joined together to discuss the issue of the environment. This was an evolution that came out of the Rio discussions to strengthen the voice of the environment within the United Nations and, of course, the role of UNEP itself. Now, this marked a historic point in a journey that for UNEP began some 40 years ago when it was created in the wake of the 1972 UN Conference on the Human Environment in Stockholm. But it's not really just a journey that can be measured in the 40 years. I believe, as the Executive Secretary mentioned, it's a journey that should be measured by the transformation of our collective understanding of what it truly means to develop sustainably. At the UN Environment Assembly, the ministers and the heads of delegation made it clear that, in a way, the end goal for development has moved. And they sent a very strong message that we need to construct this post-2015 agenda in a way that truly integrates environment with social and economic development. And they, through this, reaffirmed, in a way, a new game plan that they are pursuing, which is one of, yes, eradicating poverty, but at the same time protecting the environment and promoting inclusive social and economic development in harmony with nature. So this is an evolution, almost a revolution in thinking. And the Secretary General himself, who was in Nairobi, summed it all up very nicely when he said, and I quote, "Today, there is common acceptance among governments and peoples that a healthy environment is necessary for eradicating poverty and supporting equitable economic growth and social progress," end quote. And I believe this is really an evolution that is the result of the work of so many of us, including, of course, many of those in this room who, brick by brick, have built the case for the environmental component of sustainable development. And just as we were finishing our business in Nairobi, across the world, the Executive Secretary was there, and countries were unfolding the new set of goals, a zero draft of the new Sustainable Development Goals, a sort of a new roadmap for us, a universal agenda for developed and developing countries to move forward in the coming years. And in a way, we're now sort of poised, and of course there are some negotiations pending that will refine these 17 Sustainable Development Goals and the hundreds of targets that fall under them. But we are poised for a crucial next phase in human development, a universal post-2015 Sustainable Development Agenda with the full recognition of the 3 pillars of sustainability. But as we do that, we need to recognize, I believe, that the old rules are still in play. The stubborn patterns, if you will, of yesterday's economic and development models remain very evident around us. A report last year by the Tea Business Coalition, just to give you an example or two, estimated that the top 100 environmental externalities of business are costing the global economy around $4.7 trillion a year in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, in terms of loss of natural resources, in terms of the loss of the natural nature-based services, carbon storage by forests, etc. At the same time, the IEA estimates that fossil fuel consumption subsidies reached 523 billion in 2011, up again from the year before. And this is about 6 times more, just in terms of subsidies, 6 times more than is being invested in renewable energies. So clearly, it's got an adverse effect on the transition to a clean energy future. And I think these two are just small illustrations that the persistent gap exist between our old financial rules and structures that aren't necessarily sufficient to meet the Asia-Pacific's demand, and let alone the global demand for a clean energy, green economy future. And the dominant consumption patterns that the Executive Secretary mentioned of societies is of course also placing a major stress on natural resources. We have released a report out of the International Resource Panel that showed that total resource use grew 8-fold between 1990 and 2000. 8-fold increase. And it's set to increase still more. So unless economic growth is decoupled from natural resource consumption, the trajectory is clearly taking us in the wrong direction from a sustainability point of view. And of course this has an impact and is having an impact in our region, in the Asia-Pacific region. Our region is the one that's accounted for about 50% of the world's total damage due to natural disasters in the last century. A lot of this is happening in the vulnerable low-lying deltas in the small island states, etc., of our region, from Bangladesh to China, India, Vietnam, all over our region. Same can be said for air pollution. Air pollution today is considered probably the single largest environmental health risk in the world. 7 million premature deaths annually are now attributed to indoor and outdoor air pollution, according to figures released by the World Health Organization. And 70% of these premature deaths are in our region, in Asia and the Pacific. 11 of the world's most polluted cities are here in our region. Probably something that will not in any way come as a surprise to the people living in Beijing or Tehran or New Delhi. And premature deaths, of course, and the health problems associated with air pollution are causing major economic costs. At least 300 billion is the cost, according to the government of China, in one country alone. And of course, we are in a region that is home to extraordinary biodiversity and ecosystems, but fast declining biodiversity and ecosystems. Deforestation, habitat loss, overfishing, you're all very familiar with the figures and with the numbers. So as our economies grow, we will need to improve the sustainability of our development, from protecting biodiversity to managing energy and resource use to planning how our fast-growing cities grow and expand. Because without reducing pollution, without increasing our resilience to disasters, without promoting cleaner, more efficient energy, without better managing our forests and our natural capital, without creating livable cities, without the air pollution and increasing our food security, countries will simply not be able to address their development and poverty reduction priorities. And that is why we are calling for a new game in Asia-Pacific, a new game for sustainable development. And already countries are applying what we would see as a green lens to much of their work, from the work in their financial sectors to the way they are engaging with major stakeholders, from the way infrastructure is being built to the way that consumption and production is being promoted, to name just a few. And the move towards the goal of a green economy, as we call it, is really happening here and now all around us, and probably on a scale and at a speed never seen before. From the 3R concept here in Japan, to the new economic model of Malaysia, to the ecological civilization of China, and many more countries have put in place green economy, green growth plans, low carbon, low emission plans. The Executive Secretary mentioned a few that have been supported by the UN, SCAP, and its work as well. And according to research by the REN21 network, of a total of 214 billion global new investment in renewable power and fuels in the 2013-14 period, over half was in Asia-Pacific, with, again, half of that being in China. So we are seeing the shoots of a different kind of economy, of a new kind of investment for our future. And many communities are also benefiting from investing in their natural resources to promote a more sustained and sustainable growth. Let me just cite one example. In the northern plains of Cambodia, a small project supported by APFED, and we'll be talking about APFED later on this afternoon, a small project of APFED supported by the government of Japan is linking community agriculture cooperatives to biodiversity conservation in wildlife sanctuaries and protected areas. And it's demonstrated that we can both meet environmental conservation needs and poverty alleviation. It's producing the ibis rice, a wildlife-friendly rice, if you will, that simultaneously protects the giant ibis and its habitat and other critically endangered species, and of course delivers, importantly, local farmers with a premium rice that they are selling in the markets to sustain their livelihoods, something that may, of course, be of interest to my colleague who will be speaking next. So in conclusion, let me just say that we have probably major unfinished sustainable development agenda here in Asia-Pacific. It is true that it's a region of extraordinary transformation that has become less poor, but at the same time more unequal. And the continued well-being of humanity ultimately depends on our responsible management of our finite resources in this and every other region. I think the declaration of the recent BRICS summit in Brazil, the major economies of Brazil and India, China, etc., underlined that this is an imperative that is shared across countries and by different groups around the world. And they underline the imperative to address the challenges of humankind posed by the need to simultaneously achieve growth, inclusiveness, protection, and preservation. So playing by the principles of green economy for sustainable development will not hamper inclusive economic growth. In fact, it will drive it. It will be the driver, and it will give even more of those in Asia and the Pacific the opportunities that they desire and they very much deserve. So let me finish by saying meeting these forthcoming sustainable development goals, our new roadmap for the future, will very much require us to play by a new set of rules that will require us to better involve civil society, to better involve and work with the private sector, in particularly finance, and to shape a new post-2015 strategy that from what we have in front of us in our 17 goals is certainly a good start, but to be quite honest, the game has just begun. A new set of rules, new sets of players are coming into play, and we very much hope that ourselves as the United Nations, in partnership with critical partners around the world in terms of governments like the government of Japan, our technical muscle of partners like IGES, and of course the ingenuity and know-how of the private sector can enable us to begin this new game for the benefit of Asia and the Pacific. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kaveh, for your presentation touching upon the initiative taken by UNEP and also mentioning the reality Asia region is facing and also some hopes. Thank you very much. 次のプレゼン
The next presentation is from President of Fukushima, Mr. Toru Fukushima. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am here right now sitting in front of you, but I'm wondering how to understand this situation because I don't speak English and I'm not so well versed in this field. So the meaning of myself being here is that I myself have been deeply involved and have been in a position to have direct contact with consumers, and I have been focusing on farmers who actually produce vegetables and also those who process the vegetables. And I have the direct communication with those people, and my business is directly linked with those that are happening on a day-to-day basis and people's lives. And you are, all of you here, are quite well versed and have a wide global experiences and having this discussion. But how the question is how to actually apply this to the society, the low carbon and the circulation-based society. I think those words are understood on a face value, but how does this actually mean in your own lives, and what sort of behavior that each of us should take? The consumers may think that they understand that, but their conduct or behavior may not catch up with what they understand in their head. I am only aware of what's happening in Japan. Of course, I have the chance to travel abroad, but Japanese environment is more rich, and there are very few people in Japan who are starved to death. And yet, the society may be lacking some balance, and materially, it is true that we are affluent, but mentally and potentially, and in terms of business, maybe this is true in other countries, but as far as I know, this is quite unstable. And I have been operating supermarket chains for many years, and as I said, I have had very deep communications with producers. Since I'm running supermarkets, flyers may be distributed and discounts may have to be offered. That's how people usually earn living through supermarkets, but we don't distribute flyers or offer discounts, but twice a year we just have the chance to have the presentations to the customers about what we have done together with producers, what sort of initiatives we have taken, and what are the results that is communicated to the consumers or customers. And as I engage in this business, what I wanted to say today is that the social activities in this day and age the business is divided. The producers and the processors and distributors and sellers, they are all divided and separated, and not good communication is taking place, and there could be frustration, and there could be a lot of losses, not just physical losses, but losses in terms of time and losses in terms of taste of the food. So there is a tremendous loss involved. And our concept is to focus on being tasty, or maintain the tastiness of the food. And of course, if you pay enough money and buy expensive enough food, you may think that you can get something tasty, but that is not the case. You have to hit the right season, and be it fish, meat, or vegetables, you have to identify what's in, and then enjoy the food. And people have to be able to enjoy with the skills and discerning eyes, and then you can enrich your life, and this could lead to the happiness of yourself. And that you have to first be able to select right food to enjoy the tastiness, and you need knowledge, experiences, and skills. And also, what is most important is to prepare the dining table, and the way you prepare the dining table may be influenced by the personality of the people who actually prepare that table. And as we engage in this business, the agriculture, and also when it comes to Japan, the fish, mom and pop retailers of fish or meat, because there are very few of them left in Japan, because many of this food is now sold in convenience stores or supermarkets, and they are not able to earn their living through this business anymore. But we still eat vegetables and fish in Japan, and this represents or constitute a majority part of the society. But is this really all right? Because we have to embrace the feeling of tastiness, and in order to do that, the vegetables that are the resources, and the soil and land that would produce the vegetables have to be taken into consideration. It's not just an issue amongst the farmers. The consumers have to be also always aware of that. Otherwise, no matter what ideal theory that you talk about and how good technology that you have, the market and consumers have to be aware of this. Otherwise, you cannot realize that sort of concept. And more recently, the population of Japan has been declining, and the agrochemicals used per unit of farmland has been the largest in Japan, which is quite humiliating. But this has been gradually improving, and this has to be done on a sustainable basis. And in order for that to happen, you have to have the understanding of those who purchase the products. It's not just a question of not using agrochemicals and fertilizers, and avoid having holes in the leaves, and phosphorus and potassium and the nitrogen. Those are the three fertilizers, and nitrogen has the greatest potential for growth. And we have been measuring the nitrogen for each item of the food that we sell. And then we can, to some extent, grasp how the vegetables are grown. And then the processed food, like dried food or boiled vegetables that are produced out of these raw vegetables, depending on how the raw status was, we can understand what is going to happen when they are dried or processed. And then we are asking the farmers and producers to adopt a specific way of growing vegetables. And also we are communicating to the consumers that this is the way the vegetables are produced, and then you can enjoy the good food. And as I said, even if the food is expensive, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's good. So be it cucumbers or tomatoes, the way you produce them would make a lot of difference in terms of taste. And also you have to start from the seeds. The agriculture is now on the decline in Japan, but more recently, younger generations are coming into the agriculture, and I'm sure the agriculture will change. But for that to happen, the producers and sellers, marketers have to have good communication, and they shouldn't be divided, and there have to be integrated merchandising. And because if that doesn't happen, then each of the parties would pursue their own interests. So not everything is working well. That is because there's a lack of communication or disruption of communication between the parties. Of course, there are some distortions and misunderstanding. That's a fact, but we are making sure that communication happens in the field. And the customers and consumers, communication with those consumers have to be continued and sustained. And we have set up a communication space with the consumers. And it's been 3.5 years since we started this initiative. Every day we have the communication space. Maximum 15 consumers are invited. Well, sometimes there are only 5 or 6 consumers invited. Of course, it doesn't pay off, but in terms of pure business. But as we carry on, more consumers would understand our business, and that would actually bring about good profitability in the end to us. And then consumers and customers have better understanding about what they eat. And that's what is happening with our initiative. And our supermarkets are locally oriented. The grocery stores, individual grocery stores are declining, and there are fewer and fewer of them. But we are trying to revitalize those stores, and selling space and production environment have to go hand in hand. That is what I regard as my mission. And our supermarkets are quite small and vulnerable, and our company is very small. But after those experiences that I've had, and I get aged, and what I think is that even if the scale is small, if I have a model, and then we can make some difference and influence the society through our modest efforts. And I'm quite honored to have this opportunity, but I'm not sure if my presentation is appropriate in this discussion. But there could be some diversion between the reality and what is being discussed in theory. And so I do hope that there'll be realistic improvements as much as possible through this presentation. Thank you.
どうもありがとうございます。
Thank you very much. The title of this session includes lifestyle, and food, of course, is the most important part of the lifestyle. And he talked about the communication between producers and communication, trying to strengthen that communication. That's very interesting. And I think there's a message that would be viable all around the world.
To these panelists first, then I will open the floor for further question and answer session. So I have one question to both Dr. Akhtar and Kabe. That is the relationship between economy and sustainability. Dr. Akhtar, you have mentioned a couple of times green growth. Green growth means some kind of synergy you find there between economy and the environment. But how that could be achieved is a very important question. Perhaps you could perhaps elaborate on that. And Kabe, you have mentioned green economy and a couple of very good practices in various parts of Asia. And therefore, same question, how could make Asian economy more sustainable? That is, if that is possible, that is the question to you as well. So could you, Dr. Akhtar, could you start?
Thank you. I think that's a very elementary but a very primary question that we need to grapple with. First of all, I think I'd like to split this in three levels of argument. I think thus far, all across the world, we've had growth emphasis, but there has been less emphasis, relatively speaking, to the underlying dynamics of how this growth is achieved. And also, there has been less emphasis on how it damages the environment and what are its real economic benefits and gains, but going beyond that to the social benefits and gains. And I think the going forward green growth concept has to really look at this dynamics and this interplay, that while we are not going to shun the objective of growth, it has to be very central, because if you don't have growth, you're not going to have prosperity at all. But what we have to worry about is the underlying qualitative dimensions of growth. So that's at a broader level. The second point I wanted to make is that there has been also an emphasis always on short term rather than the long term. And when you focus within the green growth simulations on looking at the trade-offs between the short and the long run, you will be able to appreciate that sacrificing sometimes short-term high growth in order to lay the foundation for a fundamental change in how you achieve long-term growth is quite critical. So now there's more and more economic models and simulations that are really looking at the fundamentals of it. Related to this, I also wanted to mention that economic growth models traditionally have been very vanilla type models, where you would have real economy and macroeconomic imbalances factored in, and you would project the real economy growth based on the trend line growth rates without due regard to the production structures dynamics. So, I mean, I have traditionally worked on a number of models, and I think going forward we need more intensive and more dynamic models which are not partial equilibrium models, but general equilibrium, with segments of the economy factored in, which actually have an impact on our natural resources. There has been very few major attempts to factor the natural resource impact of the green of the growth. So I think that is a very important element to going forward. In the long term, when you have a comprehensive model, then we will realize not only that it's important to factor in not just the natural resource depletion dimension, but the technological factor has to be built in our production functions as to how to reduce the use of resources. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Kabe, you mentioned the importance of decoupling in particular. So perhaps could you elaborate a little bit on that?
Certainly. Mori-san, you've asked me two questions which, taken together, could probably be the contents of a few books.
Sorry.
One is the green economy and how to make Asia's economies more sustainable. That hopefully will be the title of my own future book in a few years' time. And the second is about decoupling. I think that maybe for the sake of the discussion here, I would like to, again, boil it down to people. That's ultimately what we're talking about. You mentioned that we need to bring these two agendas together, the sort of the theoretical and the practical, the real world and the policy world. And I think that we're talking about a more people-centered development. That's all it is. I recognize that Dr. Pachauri has entered the room, and he has been fighting hard for the issue of climate change. And the issue is not that this year, for the first time, we've had levels of exceeding 400 parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere for months on end. That's not the issue. The issue is that has an impact. That has a consequence, and that consequence is being borne by people through increased vulnerability, by people through unpredictability in the rainfall affecting their agriculture, by usually the most vulnerable in society who depend most closely on nature and the services of nature. And I think, again, decoupling, it sounds like a very lofty goal, and maybe it is in terms of big industry, etc. But at the end of the day, does it not make more sense to produce what you're producing with less energy, with less material, with less pollution? It makes economic sense, it makes sense from a point of view of environment, and of course, from the point of view of people. And at the end of the day, some of the solutions are going to be highly technical and require extraordinary new amounts of funding, and some of them are not very technical and require changes in behavior, maybe back to behavior that was seen not so long ago. Eating seasonal fruit and food is a normal thing for probably many generations, but somehow we lost it, and we are finding it again. So I think there's both the high policy ideals, the big financing, the major transformational change, and the small changes, the behavioral change that link it to the real world.
Thank you very much. Addressing these big questions in concise manner. Thank you very much.
Next question is to Mr. Fukushima. Very wonderful approach that you are taking. I admire it. And TPP is being talked about, and you have to have global view, and those are the discussions that are underway. But what is your thought on what's happening in this front, based on your view or perspective? Well, it's a very difficult question. Well, the people's lives in reality are all local, and our philosophy is, as I said, is to provide the right selling space as a locally oriented supermarket store. And in order to do that, while preparing the selling space, we have to also enhance the producers' environment, and we're doing this in parallel. And the production environment and the marketing environments could be enhanced because there has been a lot of lack of communication and consistency and alignment, and there have been a lot of losses produced out of that. And of course, we may have to collect food from around the world. That may be necessary, but if we step back and look at our own field and local community, there are a lot of things that we can take advantage of still. And Japan is a rice-producing country, and rice is something that we are giving re-look at. Thank you very much. There's 5 minutes left, so we'd like to take the questions from the floor. Thank you for waiting for the microphone to come. Since 1965, for the past 50 years, as a politician, I have been working on environmental issues. And during 1960s and 70s, the air pollution and water pollution were the ones that I worked on. And then the latter half, in the 21st century, global warming and ecological issues and global environment has become the issue. And for the past 50 years, I have been tackling this issue, and I had realized how helpless and powerless politicians are. But there have been improvements, and there's limited time available. And Dr. Kabe Zahedi talked about 3 R's in Japan, and I'd like to focus on that. After I retire from the active position, I have been also working on these issues, and especially population is increasing and economy is growing and standard of living is enhancing in Asia. And from that perspective, 3 R's and waste and resource utilization will become more important. But in reality, it's totally far away from what we aspire. And out of 3 R's, reuse is something that I would like to focus on in particular. The e-waste, electronics waste in Japan are exported to Asia and Africa. And it has been bringing about profits to developing countries because there's a job for repairing them. But in the Basel Convention of the UN, it started with the concept of waste. So they are all treated as wastes, and they have been removed and excluded. So maybe we need a change of concept and mindset. Even if they are waste, if they still can be used, we have to reuse them as much as possible. So I'd like to ask for your thoughts on this. And also, Mr. Fukushima, every day, the plastic bags are excessively used in the supermarkets. I always bring my own bag to put grocery in. So the famous concept of mottainai in Japan has to be more utilized. So I'd like to ask for your thoughts on that. Thank you. This question has to be addressed by all panel members in the interest time. I'd like to take only this question.
Reuse, reduce, and recycling, 3 R practice in Japan, and its importance. So perhaps 今度ちょっと逆のオーダーで福島さん。
Maybe starting from Mr. Fukushima. A friend of mine has a business called Hard Off or Book Off. This is a recycling of the used books and items. And in food, the concept of mottainai has to be emphasized. And you have to embrace the concept of having tasty food. And by having each one of us having this mindset, there will be added result produced. And also the petroleum-based plastic bags used in supermarkets. That's what you mentioned. 4 years ago, we stopped distributing this free of charge. And once we stopped using these plastic bags free of charge, the monthly sales is about 150 million yen for us. And after 1 month, since we stopped using plastic bag, 10 million yen decline per month continued for 3 months. And we were the only ones that stopped using plastic bags. And the competitors, the supermarkets, competing supermarkets are still using back then. And if everybody stops using this, then we are on a fair competition. So that should be very important.
Okay, concise means very short.
Yeah, very short.
I hope that, let me answer it in a broad way. I hope that the presentations that have been made here don't leave the wrong impression. I think that extraordinary advances have happened, including here in Japan, both in terms of technology and in terms of behavior. And I think we can see that throughout the world. And I think we have extraordinary political commitment and understanding the evolution that the Executive Secretary mentioned that will be impacting the way we reuse, the way we deal with our e-waste, the way we deal with our food waste, because it's having a personal cost to the consumer, it's having an impact on the environment in terms of water use, and of course it's having a broader impact, for example, on climate change, because waste ultimately rots away, emits the methane, and there you have more global warming. And I think it's that integrated thinking that is bringing about new solutions, and reuse, including on e-waste, will have to be one of them. Right now, we're still on the low-tech side of reuse with plastic bags. Maybe one day we'll make it to iPads and other machinery. But I think your point is not lost on us, and I believe that it is something that increasingly, as we think about circular economies, increasingly as we think about the entire supply chains and not just the one part, the one purchase, the one product, we will be able to resolve in a way that makes economic sense as well.
Okay. Executive Secretary Akta.
I think a lot has been said, so I'll just be very short. I think rather than looking at one product and trying to manage that, I would much rather advocate promoting a change of mindset, which can only come if you are taught about these things from first from your class 1 in school, because your behavioral change has to be very sustainable. These little ad hoc things are going to make a difference in one corner of the world and another corner of the world, but not be very sustainable. And of course, there's tremendous amount of variation in behavior between developed countries and developing countries, where some of these concepts have yet to be ingrained.
Thank you very much. I think with this, we'd like to conclude this session. Thank you very much. And please give good applause to all these panelists. Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed.
森所長ご登壇
Mr. Mori and the panelists, thank you very much. With that, we close the second plenary session. We'll have a break until 10:45. Please do not take the simultaneous interpretation receivers from this hall. Please leave them on the table. From 10:45, there will be 3 parallel sessions, including one in this room. Please go to the session that you have registered or pre-registered. In this room, there will be the parallel session 8, Financing Low Carbon Technology Transfer for Small Medium Enterprises.